Welcome back. The U.S. and Israel's airstrikes on Iran are now in their third day as the attacks on both sides continue to intensify. This comes after nuclear talks had stalled and others fizzled out. Hundreds in Iran and Israel have died as allied countries begin to enter this fighting. But there is a lot of history and context that goes into understanding this particular conflict and the impacts it's going to have.
That's why we have Dr. Micheline Ursay. Did I get it close?
Perfect.
Perfect? You're going to say that no matter what. Professor of Human Rights and International Studies at DU, and she's been with us before, and you understand this history, which, again, trying to explain this in like 3 minutes is bananas, but we're going to attempt to do something. Explain the structure of Iran's government.
The structure. Well, since 1979, we have a sort of a a hybrid theocratic regime in Iran. On the top of the pyramid is the supreme leaders. Then there are two bodies, the parliament and the presidents that are elected by the people, but they have to be, the candidates have to be always vetted by the religious authority, and the final say is usually the religious authority. And below that is the National Guard, the military, the Ardash, the media, the education, etc. But the final say in times of conflict and crisis is always the supreme leader, which happened to have been killed just 2 days ago. Ali Khamenei just died in his palace.
So this becomes a very complicated, it was complicated to begin with, even more complicated now after these strikes. But what happens in the Middle East at large because of this? Because when Iran responded, they hit other countries around them, and so now more people are involved. What happens now?
Well, the first response of the Iranian government after the killing of the supreme leader was to hit some of the countries which were not hostile to the regime, such as Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates and Qatar and so forth. And now there is a question as to what extent, and it's not just because of the American military base, but also because they wanted to make sure that they have those countries create pressures toward the United States and ask them to stop the fight. Israel has been hit the most, clearly. There is constantly under bombardment and siren. And there is a constant encroachment, tit for tat between the Israeli and Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon, which is sort of brewing. But just as of today, the president, Michel Aoun, said that he was not recognizing the military actions of Hezbollah.
Oh boy, there's so many groups to understand too. We did initially see, though, like the Iranian people celebrating. So many people thrilled by this. And Iranians that live here in the United States now say, thank goodness this happened. But then you say, now what? I mean, do they rise up? Do they find a way to find leadership? What do you think?
Well, yes, there is a great number of people who were celebrating. Some of them who were mourning, also the
some
Khamenei,
still supported, the supreme leader.
Great majority. I mean, there's been a lot of things that's happened to the Iranian people. I mean, we know that there was a major drought, economic distress, condemnations that the government is invested too much into warfare and nuclear uranium enrichment rather than their own population. So generally speaking, the loyalty that used to exist among the Bazari has been faded away. And so back to your question, what is next? Well, there's a lot of scenarios. One of the scenarios is that if the National Guard is not downgraded severely, I mean, then you will have potentially the possibility for the National Guard to be emboldened and stay authoritarian and continue its massacre against its own population.
Oh boy.
Another scenario, if there is a success story in terms of the overthrow of the National Guard, then there will be a void. And the question, what is in preparation? Is there anything in preparation? We know that some have called for the son of Pahlavi to come back as an interim government, but does this son have sufficient connections with the National Guards, with the Ardash, which is the military securities, with local institutions, Can he favor the economic condition necessary to sustain this transitional regime? So all the type of question that everybody usually asks when you go through any form of transition.
We've seen Iraq and Afghanistan. We have other examples of this kind of conflict and issue and how America can get sucked into, what people call a forever war. I'm wondering what you think has to happen now. The strikes have happened, but that's not ever really enough for regime change, right? People on the ground have to organize. Do you think Israel and America have people on the ground doing that?
I'm not purview to intelligence, but I would assume that there is effort. It would be very reckless if that was not the case, and that might be the case, but it will be reckless. Pahlavi has already discussed a great deal of what a transition government would look like. It would need to root. There need to be rooted to Iranian institutions in order to actually be operable. We don't know that if that is the case, but it is always true to say that. Just give you the analogy of a surgeon. If you strike surgically and you open a patient, you don't want to leave the patient, with open scars. You need to close the suture. And so we are in the situations. There's been a strike. Is the Iranian population going to be left suffering, bleeding, hemorrhaging, or will there be more to help them heal, to the regime and the people to heal and create the services needed for the management of the daily life? This is the big question that we will see in the weeks to come.
That was a perfect analogy. I really understand it much more. Dr. Ursay, you're the best. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.
Sure, we're going to see you over the coming weeks as well. Thank you.